We'll do a review in the Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chop Aleph, and this is in volume 21, and this is the first Sicha for the Parshas Boy. It's a Rashi Sicha, and the Rebbe comes up with a new idea how to explain why Rashi needs both interpretation and many of the diukim, the specifics, the way Rashi brings it down, and the heading of Rashi, according to the explanation, everything works out beautifully. But let's learn inside, and we'll go step by step. So, boy, Ifum Posik Koy Omar Hashem Kachatzois Halaylo. So this is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to Parei and his people over there. So he says, so says Hashem, Koy Omar Hashem, Kachatzois Halaylo ani yoytze b'toich Mitzrayim. Kichatzois Halaylo, which, what does it mean? Approximately at midnight, ka, in the context of about, or kichatzois halayla, when the light splits. This is the two pirushim Rashi explains. Kichatzois halayla, and the yotze b'toich Mitzrayim. At chatzois halayla, I will go out in Mitzrayim. The Eibishter will smite all the firstborn, as the pasuk continues over there. So what does exactly Kechatzois Halayla mean? Bringt Rashi zwei Perushim. In Kechatzois Halayla, Rashi brings two interpretations, how to interpret the meaning of Kechatzois Halayla. Number one, Aleph, Rashi brings down Pshutei, which is the simple meaning. And that is, as Rashi says, Liyashvoi al Ifanov, to settle the pasuk on its ways. This is the simple meaning, and the Rebbe will actually use this diuk of liyashvei alifanov to explain the key of what Rashi means here. But for now, Rashi says the simple meaning of the pasuk, to settle it in its ways, is as der taich von kachatzois halaylo. What does it mean? Kachatzois halaylo is kehei cholik halaylo, when the night is split. There's a certain point where the night splits between one part and the second half point of the night. So kechatzois, ki does not mean about. Ki means when. Kechatzois halaylo, kehei cholik halaylo. When the nacht teilt sich, when the night separates, divided, splits. Vasloit dem pirush, according to this interpretation, as Rashi continues, is ein chatzois shem davar shel chetzi. Chatzois is not a noun, is not a shem davar saying half. It's an act of splitting versus midnight. It's not a name of midnight, but we're talking about the act when the night is split. So it's the act, not the shem davar, not the item itself. Halbe Nacht is not midnight, nor sizapula, but rather it's an act. What Rashi brings the Rev Kama Dugmois, Rashi brings several examples which the ki is used as a act when chatzois halaylo, and Rashi brings down other examples. Ki alois, when it goes up, not in the context of about, but in the context of when. Norsizapula, at the time that what Rashi brings the Kamedugmos. That's the first interpretation. Then Rashi brings down Beis the Rabbi Chaim Wolosow, And our teachers, they expounded kimoi, that what it means is ki bechatzois, that the chatzois is a shem dover, but the ki means approximately around chatzois. Ki bechatzois halaylo, approximately around midnight. Va'amru, chatzois halaylo means midnight, not when the night splits. It's the shem dover. Ki bechatzois, approximately around midnight. Va'amru, and our sages, they said that Rabbi Seinu, who expounded that, Sha'omar Moshe kechatzois, that Taka Moshe Rabbeinu said approximately midnight, the mashma samuch loy, which has the meaning kachatzois, close to midnight. And the reason why he said close to midnight is shemoyid to it stagnine parei, because the stargazers of parei, they may make a mistake. V'yemru, and they, if he said midnight, and according to them it wasn't midnight, they're gonna say Moshe bad doyihu. Moshe makes up stories. He's not truthful, because he said chatzos, and if he would have said chatzos, and it didn't happen exactly chatzos, because they would make a mistake. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu said chatzos, approximately midnight. So chatzos is do. So therefore, in this meaning is chatzos is do the shem dover shel chetzi. It means half, a halbe Nacht. Und das, was Moshe hat gesagt, kechatzos samuch lei. What did he say? Close to it, not bachatzos, not bachatzos b'diuk exactly. Is weil hat choshesh given. He was worried. Shema yitu chulu v'yemer Moshe badoyu, because they may make a mistake and they'll say that Moshe is makes up stuff. He's not truthful. Und dennoch is Rashi Messiahim. When Rashi ends, that this is the way Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, Kichatzos, approximately midnight, because he was worried about it, that they may make it a mistake and come to a conclusion or a conclusion. Like Kamer Kurisois. So Rashi concludes, this is in many versions, but Hashem does know his times, know his seconds. Omar Bechatzos, Hitake said to Moshe at midnight. Moshe changed it from what Hashem told him, and he said, Kichatzos, just to caution from the mistake of the Itztagnim. As the Rebbe will explain, this is also really what the Eibishter told him. He would not say something which the Eibishter didn't tell him, and that's going to be the problem with the second shot, as we will see in a few minutes when we get to there in the Sichos. So let him then Mizrahi. So what's going on over here? What's Rashi having two interpretation? So the Mizrahi and noch Mefarshim, the way they explain, as the Schwierigkeit in Posik, what's the difficulty in the verse? Was Rashi kommt verantworten mit den zwei Pirushim, which Rashi is coming to answer with the two interpretation. Is al derech v'dikashi in Gemara that is similar to the question in the Gemara. Question is, why does he say about Kichatzois, about midnight? Mi'ikos sveiko kamei shmaya? Is there then a doubt before Hashem that he says approximately? Oy menzol zogun az chatzois is shem dover shel chetzi. If chatzois means midnight, this is the shem dover of chetzi. So then it turns out as der kof und kechatzois, that the kof kechatzois is a kof hashir. It's a approximation about the dugmois welcher bringt as the examples brought down by the Elio Mizrahi. He says ka'aseres hayomim, in about 10 days, approximately an eighth of soirim. The ki is approximate. Das heißt ungefähr, approximately. Be'erech, around it. A room, der Zeit von Chatzois. That would mean around Chatzois, around the time of Chatzois. Heißt es doch. So that would mean, as a dover mesupek, that this is a question which is in doubt. Men weiß nicht dem genauen Zman, wenn das wird vorkommen. We don't know the exact time when it's going to happen. So the problem is, we can't say this towards Hashem that he doesn't know exactly when it's going to happen. How could he say approximately? I've done bringt Rashi zwei Perushim. So Rashi brings two interpretations. Aleph take kechatzois alaylo mean kihei cholik alaylo. When the night is split, was baya peula badai der chof. When it's an act, the chof doesn't mean approximately, it means when. Kasher. The chof means when. Kachatzois halaylo means kasher yicholik halaylo, when the night will split. Which actually means punkt in halber Nacht, exactly midnight, when the night splits. Kumtois, so that means, it turns out, as is in them nit given kein sofik, it was no doubt, because on the contrary, it's when the night splits exactly. Beis, and the second answer is in Rashi, as Rabbi Mizrahi explains, it means like just about, approximately midnight. The mashma samuchloi means nearby. And the reason why Moshe said so, Take, is Shema Yitu, because the Instagninim, they may make a mistake. Aber der Eibishter hat Take gesagt Bachatzois. The Eibishter Take said Bachatzois. This answers the question. Them genoims man the exact time. So the issue, explains Rabbi Mizrahi, is how could we say Mika Sveika Kamedishmai approximately? So the first answer is that it means when the night splits, so it's exactly, but the word Ke means when. And in the second answer, Taka means approximately midnight, but that was just said in order to prevent the mistake from the Instagnine Pare, but Hashem Taka told him Bachat, so he says Rashi brings down. But this is all under the assumption that it says Ke means approximately because we don't know the exact time. We say approximately, but it can also be meant not because we don't know. We're just saying approximately because it doesn't have to happen exactly at midnight. It can happen in the approximation of midnight. Base, man darf aber verstehen. Was ist der Hechrech zu sagen? What forces us to say, as wenn der Chof von Kichatzois is a Chof Ashir, that when the Chof of the Kichatzois is an approximately midnight, is Yechuyev Sheyi Adover Mesufak. Why does that obligate us that this is something which we have in doubt? Men ken doch onemen. We could also accept as a zokt kichatzois chof ashir, that he says about midnight, nitzli basofik b'dov, not because we're not sure when. Nor valdos vetaka forkum somoch lachatzois. It's going to happen around midnight because that's when it's going to happen. It doesn't have to happen at midnight. It's going to happen near midnight, but not because it's a question. But we don't, when we say a time, we don't give the precise time. We push it towards the Chatzois because it's going to be near Chatzois. So that wouldn't be a problem. And he brings Befrad with the Levush frekt, especially as the Levush asked the question. Even when a person says ke approximately, it doesn't mean that this is something which he's not sure when it is. He may know exactly, but he's just the reference point, he says, because it's not at the reference point, just near the reference point. As his nervous is just that he did not care to say them genoyim schum, the exact amount mit misporim protim, with detailed numbers. And that's why a person, when they speak, will say near a general number, a specific number. So you'll say, like, if it's 99, you'll say you say around 100, but you don't say the details exactly. So that doesn't mean because you don't know, it just means because that's the way you give the sign to something general. But in our case, the Rebbe says we can't really say that this is the meaning of Kichatzos, because immediately following it says befedish that it was Bachatzos. The time was not near Chatzos. The time was Bechatzos Mamish. Der Tam bepashtus favos mikena zoni zogen is, well, steht weiter in Posik because it says further in the Posik, Vahi bachatzi halayla v'Hashem kol b'chor komer. It was at midnight when Hashem smit. As makas b'choris is given ginoi b'chatzi halayla. It was exactly unit somuch lachatzos, and not near midnight. So we can't say that here it means near midnight, but because it was at midnight. But the Rebbe still doesn't feel that this issue is really enough to say that that's why Rashi has a problem. And that's why there wouldn't be a problem with the Kichatzois, meaning approximately, because Rashi should bring down, if the problem is because the Pasuk later on, then Rashi should bring down the Pasuk and say, well, it says in the Pasuk it was Bachatzois, so how could it say here Kichatzois? As Obenit Mistaber zu sagen, das ist der Hechlech von Rashi da, it's not really logical or to say that that forces Rashi here. But if Rashi's entire proof and his problem is from the later posik, that because it says there chatzois, so how come it says here kichatzois, and that's Rashi's problem, and that's where Rashi has to come onto the two commentaries. Both Rashi daftar bringing them posik. The he should have brought this posik and says later on. How come it says here Kichatzos? We get at Kama Pa'omim, as we spoke many times. As Rashi Bipirusha La Torah, Rashi in his commentary on the Torah, Farlos Sechnit Far Posik, does not rely on a verse was there Ben Chomish Dochnit Gileren that the 5-year-old had not studied yet. Ubefrat, especially. As freer, this is before, if Posik in Parshas Lech Lecha, Vayicholik Aleihim Lailo. That's when Avram was fighting with the Malachim. It says he split on them at night time. Berengt Rashi Arof Medrash Agode. So what does it mean by Yicholik Aleihim? Shenechlek Halaylo. The night was split. V'chetziyei hasheni nishmar lechatzois laila shel Mitzrayim. And the second half was kept for the midnight of Mitzrayim, the Hainu. So that means as the Chatzois Lailo Shel Mitzrayim, that the midnight of Mitzrayim is nicht verbunden davke mit Rega von Chatzois Lailo, that it's not connected with the instant, exactly midnight, but the second half of the night. Nor mitten Chetzia Hashen in Algemein, just with the second, generally, the second part. So, therefore, say ki approximately would be okay over here. So Rashi should have said, but the pasuk says bachatzi. So how could we say ki? Rashi zicher gedacht darauf bringen dort den pasuk vahi bachatzi alayla goymer. He should have brought down the pasuk and say, well, this was at midnight. How come the pasuk says kichatzos? Because Rashi indicated before it was bechlal, the second part of the night, but here the pasuk says bachatzi. I should ask that if that is the problem with. Why does it say Vahi Kichatzos Alayla? About does Rashi bring nicht den Posik. Rashi does not bring the verse. Schreibt auf den ersten Pirush And he writes about the first comment, Zer Pshuta Liashwa Leifanov. This is the simple meaning to settle it according to its ways, is mashma. It appears as pshutei from the posik mitzad atzmei that the simple meaning of the posik in of itself is machriach zu taichen, forces us to translate kicholik halaylo when the night was split, not because it says later on in the posik bachatzi halaylo, and here it says kachatzois halaylo, and how could it be? But here itself it means that it was split, as the Rebbe will explain. Now the Rebbe is going to want to know why is the first shot that the night was split, when the night splits more shot than is the interpretation midnight. That Chatzois means midnight. And the Rebbe is going to prove the word midnight is pretty common. The two times that the Torah says Chatzois, it means midnight. Gimel. Euch darf man verstehen. Aleph. Mit was ist der erste Pirush von Rashi mehr Pshute? What makes the first interpretation of Rashi more literal wie der zweite Pirush than the second Pirush? Welcher Rashi ruft on Drash? Rashi calls it a Drash, an expounding, not the Pshat. Man kann nicht sagen, it looks almost in Rashi, but Rashi is trying to tell you that the word Chatzois is literally means, in Pshat, means split more than midnight, as it almost seems in Rashi, the Rebbe says, because we do find Chatzois, the two times that the Pasuk talks about Chatzois, it means midnight. It doesn't mean split. So, Mekenit Zogun, you can't say, as Lipip Shutei, as according to the Pshat, is Ein Chatzois Shem Dover Shel Chetzi. When it says Chatzois, it doesn't mean midnight. Wie men wollt lechere gekent einteilen Loshen Rashi, that seemingly you could interpret Rashi's language. Rashi says, like this, quoting, Zehu pshutei liyashvei al eifanov. This is the meaning why. Rashi gives a reason. She ein chatzois shem davar shel chetzi. That the shem means because chatzois is not the shem davar, is not midnight. That as ein chatzois shel davar shel chetzi is she, is an esina stam of zehu pshutei. Actually, this is the simple meaning, because in Pshat is Chatzois is not midnight, but it means when it splits. So the Rebbe says you can't say that in Rashi. Well, the word Chatzois states zweimal in Mikra. There's two times in the Pasuk that it says Chatzois. The Rebbe brings down in Tehillim and in Iyov. On in beide Erter is Chatzois Shem Dover Shel Chetzi. Over there it means, in both cases, it means midnight. It's a Shem Dover. It's midnight. What does Rashi mean? Rashi doesn't mean to say she as a reason. When Rashi says Zeu Pshutei, this is the simple meaning, and which means She'ein Chatzois Shem Dover Shel Chetzi, that the Chatzois is not midnight. Meint Rashi kidei liyashvei alefanov loit pshutei. In order to settle it as Rashi wants to say the first pshat according to the pshutei. The answer is that darf mechader zaynun zogun. So we have to say it's not a reason, but she'ein chatzois shem dover shechetzi. That in our case she'ein chatzois v'nidin nedan shem dover shechetzi. Over here, Chatzois does not mean chetzi as it means elsewhere, but here it means like it's split. Because Rashi needs that, the Rebbe will explain why. But because we need to explain over here, it means that it is ki cholik, when you split. And then we're saying, in this case, chatzois does not mean midnight, but when you split the night. But not that it's approved, because it doesn't otherwise fit, because chatzois is, in the Torah, the two places means midnight. Heint. So, bald as dort wo steht chatzois is es Hashem dover shel chetzi. So now, where it says chatzois, it means really chetzi. Favozom and zogon. So why is the pshat we were saying? The pshat here means when you split. What's the logic? Why should we say as the pshutif chatzois do? Now, what is the simple meaning over here? Chatzois is nit Hashem dover shel chetzi. It doesn't mean midnight. Nor ki cholik halayla when the night is split. Was ein lo eid b'mikra. We don't find any witness. There's no example in the psukim anywhere like this. Und der Pirush as das meint samuch lechatzois, and this that it means near chatzois, which is we find in the Torah at midnight, is not an inyan shel Rashi. Rashi makes it into an idea of only expounding. Okay, now there's a problem with the second shot also, that you have to say that that Moshe Rabbeinu changed it in order not to make a mistake. Although according to here, this you have to say as Moshe had gesagt, that the reason says approximately by midnight in order to caution the mistake. And so that's for another reason. But that is a sober l'chayra an inyan v'chashash. So it seems like that's looks like an idea. It's a worry. It has also room. It makes can you accept it according to the literal way of learning? And so why don't we say that it means approximately? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said in order to make sure that they don't make a mistake. Base. Was meint Rashi in zweiten Pirush? What is the meaning in the second pshat that if it's going to be, I can't say chatzois, bachatzois, because then they would say that he makes up stories. They may make a mistake. They're going to make the mistake, and they're going to make the wrong time of chatzois, and then it's not going to happen. Their time chatzois, they'll say Moshe made it up. Moshe is a badoi, makes up stuff. Moshe them from Shema. Why should Moshe accept and this worry of perhaps mitazaz with such a certainty? He's so certain that this is a worry. When all Bechodes will die at once. According to their cheshbon, they made a mistake. And he said, Unit genoi in the regel von Chatzois. Moshe Rabbeinu said Chatzois. They all died next to Chatzois. And that's going to be so certain as Moshe, as Vetman Zogun, as Moshe Badoyu. Moshe makes up stories. Okay, so they died a minute before, 2 minutes before, whatever the mistake is there. But why are they going to say Moshe Badoyu? And Moshe was so certain to the extent, bis zu Mishana sein Loshon Hashem. He changes the language that Hashem told him. Hashem told him, Bachatzois Zogun Kichatzois. He said Kichatzois. Gimel. In the Msiyum, the third question, in the Msiyum from Pirush Rashi, in the end, when Rashi says, Abel HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Yedeya Ito V'Regov, the Eibishter knows his times, his seconds. Amar B'Chatzois, Hitaka said B'Chatzois. Is nit moving? It's not understood here. Why does Rashi B'chlal have to bring down what the Eibishter told him? That the Geret Kamapom is a feeling when Rashi bring Medrash Chazal, even when Rashi quotes the Medrashim of our sages of blessed memory, is a normaitik the inyonim. He only quotes those matter v'zayna meyashiv divra mikra that answer and settle the words of the pasuk. Und haben an ort al derech hapshat, and they have room in the literal on the way of the literal learning the pashut pshat. That man verstehen beniden the dan, so we need to understand in our case. Afal pias der inyan is genommen geworden for Rabbi Sein. Although this is taken that the Eibishter knows the time, he said bachatzois. That's taken from our teachers in the Medrash. Was is aber der hechrech al derech hapshat zu sagen? Why do we have to say what forces us, according to the literal style of learning, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar b'chatzois, that Hashem said b'chatzois? Now you have to say that Moshe changed it from Hashem. Maybe Hashem took into consideration, and he also said kichatzois. According to this, you need to say, as Moshe had Mishane given me the Burush Lakadosh Baruch Hu, that Moshe changed from Hashem's words. We meforshim zayin, and the Meirich has meforshim prolong about this. Why can't we learn? As if der Eibishter gesagt Moshe zu uns sagen Paren kichatzois, he also told me kichatzois. Mitzad demselben Tam Guf Hashem yituchulu, for the same reason. Maybe they'll make a mistake. So Hashem told him to say that. Why do we need to say Hashem told him bachatzois and he changed the kichatzois? And question number 4, was is Rashi meitig from Posuk euch dem Wort halaylo? Kichatzois halaylo. We're not explaining the halaylo, we're only explaining chatzois. L'chayre seine beide perushim nor beneged dem Wort kechatzois. We're explaining what the meaning chatzois, when he split it, or about chatzois, ki cholik, or the k'mei b'chatzois. Why does bring down halaylo? So the Rebbe explains that the Rashi starts off to explaining Lifi Ifanov that it should make sense in the contents of the story. And why was Bechlal necessary for Moshe Rabbeinu to give a time when the plague? We don't find it giving the times. And the other times that he gave had specific reasons. And it must mean that the time over here is an expression that Hashem himself is going to come at a certain time, but this doesn't seem to really get that special moment. Why is saying Kichatzois Alayla giving us a Hashem will come down because Chazit? That's the key to understanding. Let's see, Dalet. But das Verstehen behagdem adik in Lashon Rashi by first we'll understand this by first introducing the specific language of Rashi. Zehu pshutoi liyashvoi al eifanov. This is the simple meaning to settle the pasuk on eifanov. This seems like a extra language. Rashi should have said, as he says in many places, this is the simple, and our teachers expound. Nor der mit taited Rashi on. That Rashi points out over here as the Schwerigkeit in the Werte kichatzois alaylo, the difficulty that he has in the word chatzois alaylo, welcher is meitig, that he quotes, is nicht mitzad dem pirush from word kachatzois. It's not because here we have a problem how to translate the word kechatzois. Unafile nitzli b'tambas los sich azoy nitaichen klape mailo. And even not because of the reason that, how could you say approximately with regards to Hashem, as Rabbi Leo Mizrahi asks, how could you say Mikas Sveika Deshmaya? This is not the problem as Rashi has. That's not the Rashi's problem. Nor mitzad dem toichna inyan sheba mikro. Liyashva leifanav means because of the posik over here. Der Pshute darf sein as a pirush. This simple needs to be such an explanation. Was miyashiv sein the mikra alefanov to settle the posik on his ways. As the Werter kachatzois alaylo soll na reinplassen, the word kachatzois alaylo should fit in klolus teuchen ha'inyan sheba mikra, in the general idea of the content, what the posik is trying in the posik here. They're beating them. What is the explanation? Lernen dich dem posik koyomar Hashem kachatzois alayla ni yitze betoich Mitzrayim. When we learn the verse that it says, Hashem says at midnight I go out in Mitzrayim. There's immediately a very simple question. Why is it important to tell us that when am I going out, that it will be at midnight? You can't say as der mito der Eibishter stam gebolt mit dir sein Pare. That just like that, the Eibishter wanted to notify Pare there's man from the Makkah at the time of the plague. Babarov Makkah, so the Eibishter nit bashtim the genoin zman. By the most of the Makkahs, Hashem did not designate the exact time when the Makkah wird vorkommen, when it's going to take place. Afile by Dever and Borod und Arbe, the plagues and the hail, the locusts, is by Dever und Arbe. So when we talk about the Dever and the Arbe, so over there, hat der Eibishter Kaveh given them Tog Mocher. Out there, the Eibishter says tomorrow. Also, need to show in Tog, but not which hour of the day. It just says the next day. By Borod, and even then we have by Borod by the hail. Over there, would the Eibishter had gesagt Ka'es Mocher at this point tomorrow. Ukapirush Rashi plays, what does it mean today? At this time tomorrow, he made a mark in the wall. When the sun comes there tomorrow, that's when it's going to take place. Over there is a specific reason for why that was important to tell him exactly in order to protect as their Yores Var Hashem. Those who feared Hashem and they want to protect their animals, they should know the time in order to be able to save their servants and their cattle from this plague. There's nothing here to save, nothing here to tell them. Why was Hashem telling them when the Makkah was going to take place? And the Rebbe says we don't even know which day. It just says Kachatzos. It doesn't tell them the day, which day exactly. The Rebbe says in addition, in our case, so the Rebbe nicht gesagt, welchem Tag der Makkah wird sein. He didn't say which day the plague is going to be. Nor bloß, as wird vorkommen, Kachatzos Alayla is going to take place in Chatzos Alayla. Kann doch Pare sein, wie nicht wissen mit der Sicherheit dem Zman von der Makkah. For sure he doesn't know. He still can't know with certainty when the plague, the time of the plague, because he doesn't know which day it is. So why did Hashem tell him the date, Kichatzois Alayla, over the time? Muss man sagen, so therefore we need to say, as the Kavone in dem Sorgen Kichatzois Alayla, the intent by saying Kichatzois Alayla is not to media sein dem Zman Kavu from their Makkah, is not to let know the set time of the Makkah. Nor dosis an inyan meyuchad in oifem ve'eches HaMakkah. But rather, this is something special, a special aspect in the way and the quality of the Makkah. Kechatzois Alayla, when you do it at midnight, weist, that points when is madgish umilgale, that emphasize, that reveal is as ani yoitza. I am going out. Hashem himself is going out. That Eibishter be'atzme is yoitza bring the makkah. The Hashem himself goes out and brings the plague. State freer, as it says earlier, Leman Teida ke'en kashem alikenu. You should know there is nobody like God, our God, So here, there is a specific idea of saying Chatzois Laila, that tells you that it's Ani Hashem. This requires explanation. In was besteht der Ilu Meyuchat in dem Zman kachatzois halayla rum chatzois? What is the special elevation if we say Poshat kechatzois, approximately midnight, as das bringt arois the hafloa von ane yetze? This brings out the greatness, the awesome that I'm going out. It's going to take place around midnight. On the contrary, not only saying about midnight, bring noch dem wie Pari gesehen bei Makas Borot. After Pari saw by the plague of Borot, as he's gekommen in dem Pink the Chazman, came the exact time. In the Rega was the Rebishter hat for us gesagt on that instance that Hashem had forecasted, said in the beginning, at this point tomorrow, when the sun reaches this point, that's when the hail is going to come down. So by telling Abschwachen den Amonis Moshe, this is going to even weaken the trustworthiness of Moshe. Sein Sorgen as Ani Yotze, to say that it's going to come out, wird vorkommen, kach Chatzois halayla, approximately erich somuch lechatzois. So how is this going to impress, and especially the Ani Yotze, just saying that it's approximately after he's already experienced the exact timing? Hey, the Riber is Rashi Mefarish. That's why, in order to give the significance of Kechatzois Halayla with Ani Yotze, so Rashi explains as Kechatzois Halayla meant, what it means is Ki Cholik Halayla, when the night splits. When we say the night splits, was der late them Pirush Vertake Arois gebracht. According to this interpretation, it brings out the Pinklichkeit, the preciseness from the designated time in the most accurate way. Even more than at this point tomorrow, which you made the line and said when the sun comes here. The chilik zwischen the zwei Efanim, die zu ausdrücken dem Zman von Chatzi Halayla, the difference between these two ways, how to express the time of midnight of Chatzi Halayla, which is other Chatzois Halayla, either meaning midnight, other Ki Cholik Halayla, when the night splits, is Chatzois Halayla red wegen Zman Misuyam. Midnight talks about a time. Midnight, that's the time. Ki Cholik Halayla, when Meshach Halayla zetelt sich auf zwein, when time, the duration of time gets split in two. That is Metayr, describes Netzman, that doesn't describe time, nor a pu'ula, an act. B'hoisofer, the splitting, b'hoisofer. And Rebbe adds, as di dozik pu'ula, the act of splitting, tut sich oif, nit in a hemshech zman. It doesn't, to split something is not in a duration, a continuation of time, not in a nekuda from zman. It's only on a point of zman, not in any time. The nekuda was zetelt itzvei chatzoi halayla. It's the point that splits these two parts, the two halves of the night. Is nit kein shehus. It's not a wait, a time. Hemshach, it's not a continuation, zman. Os mekenes mesten, that you should be able to measure it. If you should be able to measure it, then that needs to be split as well, because we're splitting it. Halb zu dem ersten Chatzi Halayla und die zweite halb zu dem zweiten. And the second half to the other one. The splitting is done in the nekuda, in the point. Und das ist der Auftrag von Chatzois Halayla in Yotze. This is the novelty when we say kachatzois alayla neyotze, that Eibishter vet a ruizge bringen gain, the Eibishter will come out punkt exactly in der nekuda, in that point from kicholik alayla when the night splits. Vorum is yidei ito v'rugov. He knows his time and his moments. So, Kichatzois means when, at the time that you split it. And that's the Nakuda. Both. As is aber nicht moving. This is still not understood. We need a second shot. Why? Aber sagt man Kachatzois? Was hat zwei Teitchen? Why do we say Kachatzois, which means either when it's split, or it also has the possibility approximately midnight? The Adrabah. Not only does it have two interpretations, here we need to bring evidence that we can actually teach it kachatzois when you split. Adrabah, the pshat do darf onkum mitzraya. This pshat here, that it means when you split, needs proofs. One ein is not genug, and the one isn't sufficient. Rashi brings few rayas, und die Reihe seien nicht in ganzen gleich zu niden die dan, and these evidence are not exactly the same as in our case, as the Rebbe brings down in Ha'ara 39, in Gurari, Beir Hagoyla, the issues about that. Borum, the Rebbe says here, beide reden wegen an Nikudas Haschole, was hat der noch gehad, Hemshech, ein Meshech Zman. They talk about a point of the beginning, which followed by a continuation of time. Ois Nekuda, no more point. That's the other one, Masha'enkin do. But in our case, is Gebliba Nekuda Mamash. It remains a point. It's split. Canal. So why does the Pasuk use the word Kichatzois to give us that point? B'fshaseret gekent zogen bepashtus mamish, could have said very simply, b'chatzois mit abeis at chatzois, b'chatzois. Der Far muss Rashi ankommen zu der zweiten Pirush. That's why Rashi needs to come onto a second interpretation. Choch is nit glatik al derech hapshat, even though that's not so smooth in pshat, mashenkin adrash, as opposed to drash, is a drush. As Moshe hat angeheben koyomar Hashem, he says, so says Hashem. But then he's not saying what Hashem said. On his gleich mishana shtot bachatzois, he says kachatzois. That's adrash. That's something hard. Aber euch leid dem Pirush for Rabbi Seinu is, but also according to their pshat is HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yedeya Ito V'Ru'agov. Hashem does know his times and his seconds. Memela Mi'ikos Sveika Kam Labishmaya. And there's no doubt. Is there then a doubt? Omar B'Chatzois. He says, Hashem said B'Chatzois. Und das ist madgish dem ani yoitzer beretz Mitzrayim, because they needed to say b'chatzois, because it had to be mamish at midnight, because that emphasizes ani yoitzer, because it's happening exactly at midnight, beretz Mitzrayim, which is going to be achar erechaim. Everybody is going to hold the b'choyer. But if we're not going to say that it's really at midnight, is nicht talking time to sagen dem Zman Chatzois Laila, then there would be no reason to say B'Chatzois Laila. Why is he coming to tell us the time? Kinal Sivdalit, as we learned before in Sivdal Be'erech. Rabbi Seinu Tu and Oif, what is the novelty? What they're teaching us, the Rabbi Seinu, as wenn es ist gekommen zu übergeben Divrei Hashem el Pari. when it came to repeat and to give over the words of Hashem to Paro, Moshe changed it because of the worry Shema Yituch to make a mistake. Und sicher ist das Gufe gewähnt Rotzen Hashem. That was Rotzen Hashem. But the Eibishter said it, even according to the Rabbi Seinu, the Eibishter said it, Bachat, so that would be the Chiddush. High timer is das bloß an Inyan Shal Drash. That's why this is only a matter of Drash. Weil im Pshat Mikra steht nicht wegen zwei besondere Amiris. In the Pshat, there is no mention, there is no two separate things. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar Bachatzois and Moshe Kechatzois. Hashem said at midnight, he said midnight. Das is bloß an Inyan Shal Drash. It's an Inyan Drash. We can't say that the Eibishter also said Kechatzois because that would not be a reason to give us a time altogether. We needed to tell us exactly the midnight part. You say to himself. And there's more than this. The Rebbe says, L'cheire is da Akashia, was fragt den ganzen ob dem ersten Pirush. Would seem there's a question that challenges entirely the first explanation. That ki cholik is the time. Why are we telling that point? Nobody can know that. So we're trying to say this is the greatness of the Eibishter when nobody can really detect that. Who's going to know that it's in that Nakuda if it's not humanly possible to detect that? Similarly to be a question that challenges entirely the first explanation. When you split the night is a point in time, and Nakuda was nor that which can only be exacted by Hashem, knows when it is. When a mensch can dos nit mafchi sein, and a human being cannot distinguish that, is vos vetzukumen durch media sein pare. What is going to be added by notifying pare? Und seine Chartumen is necromancers. Und kol Mitzrayim wegen them about this, bishas as pare. Und sie alle, and all their wellness, sei wie nicht kennen mekaben sein. They will not be able to know exactly. So how are they going to see that Hashem is doing it in that precise Nakuta where they don't have the ability for that, seeing that Nakuta? Tzidos hat getroffen, Punkt in der Nakuda, was when der Laila is nechlek oder nicht. Would it happen exactly in that spot at that point when the night splits or not? They won't be able to tell it. Das wird verantwortet durch Rashi's bringen Narichus Loshna Medrash. This is answered, this problem, by Rashi bringing the length of the Medrash. Der Monen mentioned wegen Wemem hat den ganzen nicht gerät, and he mentions about such people that haven't been discussed. He talks about instagnine pari. The instagnine, who talked about instagnine pari? Rashi mentions them, that they're going to say that Moshe is badoi. Nit pari v'avodah v'kiyotze. But Rashi doesn't bring down this. Pari, the servants talked. V'mefurish b'kosuv, and the pasuk says, as Moshe geret zu pari, v'chartumim, he spoke to the pari and the chartumim, v'chazayne given, they were at the time that they spoke to be able to prove with their magician b'shas ma'isa they can and esoifton. Un oich kol avadecha eila. The pasuk says all these servants. So we talked about servants, and they'll come. Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to him. He's saying all these avadecha. So we were talking about servants. We talking about pare. We talking about chartumim. But who was talking about it stagnine? But here Rashi brings down the stagnine pare will say, das open der Montes as es kommt nicht zu durch Zogne Kudas as man, that we said before that it doesn't add by telling them the point of time, because they cannot really accurately direct to know when that instant is that it is those benegeya parevachol mitzrayim. That's as it relates to parevachol mitzrayim. They taka don't know. Mit ein oisnam, there's one exception. It's stagnini pare. Those stargazers of pare. Choizim b'mazolos v'kechovim. Those who gaze in the constellation and the stars. V'chazen bichlal dem emes. They see generally the truth. Pare sich mit sie gerechnet und getan Leute sehr anweisungen. Pare considered them and did as they instructed him, as Rashi said, that brings down the Horis. Und bechlal haben sie Machgehen gewinnt, wissen es Arega von Pulas Hashem. They were able to distinguish that instance when Hashem does. She's not given the Hashem may make a mistake, but they do have a recognition, and they are the ones that are going to say Badoy. Ches v'yesh loymar, Rebbe says, and as midam loshen, avol HaKadosh Baruch Hu yedeya ito v'rugov, Amar b'chatzois Hashem, that knows his times and his seconds, says b'chatzois, meint Rashi zu merame sein. Rashi means to hint to auf seinem Afrir, the Pirush, on his comment that he said earlier. Oy vayichal elikim b'yom hashvi, that Hashem finished by Yom HaShvi, bringt Rashi Arop Maimer Rabbi Shimon. Rashi brings down the statement of Rabbi Shimon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyedeya ito v'regov. Hashem finished on the seventh day. So Rabbi Shimon brings down. Rabbi Shimon says, Hashem who knows the exact times and seconds, nichnas bekichut hasayda, he entered as the strand of a hair. The Pshat is, what's the meaning of that? Abos of Adam can medayik zayin. A human being can be precise. At least if he puts a lot of effort, even in a instant. But a rega also has a shir. The Gemara says, Echad mechameshes Allah the 1,000 of the Gemara gives a whole big. That's still one part of that. Or rega kimemra. Rega, like saying the word rega. Rega has 3 letters. Aris read the 3 letters. Reish gimel ayin. Rega is kimemra, like it's saying. Still has a time. But a hor, made the cleansed nekuda von zman. That means the smallest point of time. Was is überhaupt nicht together. This is totally not in the boundaries from Abos Badam, from a human being to kennen sie oisteil und tepe sein, to be able to separate it and to grasp it. Afilu it's stagnino bilom. Even the stargazers in bilom. Welche kennen mafchil sein die Rega von Pulas Hashem, were able to distinguish that moment of the actions of Hashem. The Gemara discussed it, that he says Yedei lekaven das elyon but bilam. So nor davke dem Eberster, but that point of time, they can know the rega, but not the chatasayder, not the here. Nor davke the Eberster versus Yedei itov regoev can das mafkazai. It's only Hashem who knows itov, his times, can distinguish. Und das deitet on Rashi bei Parshas Seinem mit den Sorgen. This Rashi points to by saying, emphasize, Avol HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yodea Ito V'Rogov B'Chatzois. Hashem that knows the time, and the second said B'Chatzois. Mit B'Chatzois wird gemeint nicht stam die Rega von Chatzois. With Chatzois doesn't just mean that second, that instant of Chatzois. Was euch aben Odom ken mekabel sein. That can also be directed. A person can get to that, at least with a great trouble. With great trouble, with big vessels of copper, meaning there's a lot of effort. But this is the chuta side of Chatzois. That's that here strand of Chatzois. But those can mekaben zayin nor HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that can only be directed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He knows his times and his seconds. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Boy, Shabbos Parshas Yisro Tov Shin Mem.